Police have released surveillance video of a deadly shooting in Queens. Investigators say 24-year-old Javion Bivens of Hempstead, Long Island, was shot in the head on Redfern Ave in Far Rockaway Monday night.
In the early 1980s, South Jamaica, Queens was a neighborhood under pressure. A place where poverty, failing schools, and broken systems had become part of everyday life. The crack epidemic was beginning to hit the streets, offering both destruction and opportunity, depending on which side of the equation you stood. From this backdrop, a force was born not in boardrooms or political circles, but from the concrete of the streets. This was where the Supreme Team would rise, not as a myth or a story told in whispers, but as a very real, very powerful organization that would come to dominate the drug trade in Queens and become one of the most infamous street crews in American history. Their story didn't start with guns or flashy gold chains. It started with survival. And for many of the young men drawn into its orbit, the Supreme Team seemed like the only option. Kenneth McGriff, known by most simply as Supreme, was the cornerstone of this crew. A man whose name would soon carry weight not just in Queens, but far beyond. He wasn't just some street kid with ambition. He was sharp, persuasive, and he understood both the streets and the people who lived on them. Supreme was respected because he moved smart. He didn't rush, didn't draw attention early on, and made sure that every step he took was calculated. When others were trying to make noise, he was building structure. He saw the opportunity in crack cocaine, which was just starting to sweep through inner-city communities like a wildfire. And he understood that if he could control supply and manage distribution, he could do more than just make money. He could build an empire. The early formation of the Supreme Team wasn't announced with violence or drama. It started with a few trusted men, people from the neighborhood, some who had known each other since childhood. Supreme picked his circle carefully, choosing loyalty over flash, discipline over recklessness. They didn't operate like wild street dealers. They had structure, runners, lieutenants, lookouts. Each person had a role. Each block they took over was another piece of territory gained not just through brute force, but through strategy. This set them apart from other crews. While many dealers made fast money and even faster mistakes, the Supreme Team was built for longevity. As the money started flowing, so did the influence. Supreme and his team weren't just seen as criminals by some. They were seen as providers. They sponsored local events, handed out cash during the holidays, bought clothes and school supplies for kids who had nothing. To some in South Jamaica, they were doing more than the city ever had. But that influence came with its own risks.
Police are trying something new here, a tactical narcotics team called TNT. It's a coordinated effort by city, state, and federal officers, and more than 100 of them are closing down crack dens and arresting drug dealers.
The bigger they grew, the more attention they attracted, from rivals, from law enforcement, and from those within their own ranks who started wanting more. Supreme understood this and began reinforcing the organization with stronger leadership, tighter security, and layers of operations that kept the inner circle protected. By the mid-1980s, the Supreme Team had become a powerhouse. They controlled blocks, had loyal soldiers, and were pulling in serious money. Their cars were better, their clothes were sharper, and their status in the neighborhood was unmatched. But along with success came enemies. Other crews were gunning for them. Police were beginning to piece together their movements, and informants were quietly starting to talk. But Supreme, always one step ahead, kept things tight. He didn't allow unnecessary violence. He enforced discipline, and more than anything, he remained the calm center of the storm. Eventually, however, the heat got too strong. The NYPD and federal agencies began to close in. Raids, surveillance, wiretaps, all the pressure of being at the top was starting to boil. Supreme was arrested and taken off the streets, a massive blow to the organization. But the Supreme Team didn't collapse overnight. They adapted. Leadership passed to other key figures. Operations shifted. And for a time, they continued pushing weight, making money, and maintaining control. But without Supreme's vision and steady hand, cracks began to show. The streets changed. Violence began to creep in more frequently. Younger members, lacking the same discipline and patience that had defined the early days, began making reckless moves. Shootings became more common. The community, once torn between fear and respect, began to grow weary. Law enforcement capitalized on the instability, offering plea deals, applying pressure, and turning former members into informants. The fall of the Supreme Team was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling, like a tower that had lost its foundation. Still, the legacy of the Supreme Team endured. Their story was passed on through rap lyrics, documentaries, street legends, and news reports. Kenneth Supreme McGriff became a symbol of what power looked like when it came from the streets, and what it cost to hold on to that power for too long. Even behind bars, his name held weight. A reminder of the era when a crew from Queens rewrote the rules of the game in New York's underworld. The life of the Supreme Team was marked by ambition, structure, and control, but also by violence, betrayal, and loss. It's a story of young men trying to carve out space in a world that gave them very little. It's about how one man's vision turned a few street hustlers into an empire that could rival any corporate organization in structure and influence, even if its foundation was built on crime. But in the end, every empire that rises in the shadows must face the light. Even after the fall of the original operation, remnants of the Supreme Team's influence persisted in the underground world of New York. Offshoots and affiliated crews tried to carry on the legacy, though without the strategic leadership of Supreme, many of them failed to replicate the dominance that once defined the crew. Media coverage continued to draw attention to their legacy, linking newer criminal enterprises to the same roots, further solidifying the legend of the original team. In time, Supreme's story took a darker turn. After his release and later rearrest, he became embroiled in high-profile charges connected to murder-for-hire plots and ties with hip-hop figures. The line between street crime and pop culture blurred, with Supreme's name floating in lyrics and rumors. His criminal proceedings made national headlines, painting a picture of a man who, despite years behind bars, remained at the center of attention in the worlds of both crime and entertainment. The tale of the Supreme Team is not just one of drugs and violence. It is a reflection of a system that allowed such a group to rise in the first place. It speaks to the failures of urban infrastructure, the neglect of impoverished communities, and the way some young people saw no viable future outside of the hustle. When you're raised in a neighborhood where every day feels like a battle for survival, ambition takes the shape of whatever offers the quickest way out. And yet, for all its notoriety, the Supreme Team became something of a paradox. They were both feared and admired, both destroyers and providers.
Cocaine may deny these black children a decent future.
Crack was the engine that transformed the city.
If Einstein grew up in the projects, he would have been selling drugs.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.